Hey everybody, Steve here for Who Took My Dice, Ultramarines and Beyond. And I can't really believe it, but Games Workshop has hit 50 years old. They have at the time of shooting this, the White Dwarf hasn't come out yet, but 50 years. That's an exceptional time for anything to be around. And it's undergone a lot of changes, a lot of ups and downs, almost disappearing at one point. Major shifts in demographic, major shifts in popularity. A whole lot of stuff has gone on in that 50 years. Way too much for any one video to properly cover. But what I want to talk about in this is my experience with Games Workshop. The good, the bad, the ups and downs, all the cool stuff, how I started, where I am right now. Because again, I've been doing this for 26 years, so half of that lifetime I've been involved. And that's, to me, that's pretty cool. So, sit back, relax, grab a model to paint, grab something to drink, and let's go through this. So I first discovered Games Workshop as a whole and Warhammer 40,000 specifically way back in 1995. I was visiting my grandparents up in a town called North Bay. It's a big military town, or it was. It's still there, still gotten bigger like every other place. But I was actually looking for a comic book store. I've been a huge comic book fan since the early 80s. When I first got a Daredevil comic book way back in the day. But I walked in the store and it changed the course of my life, so to speak. I remember the store in a far corner. People were playing some game. I don't know what it was, but again, it was a classic green felt tabletop. The whole top was green. I went over to this massive stand, lack of a better term, filled with codexes, army books, whatever and that's when I saw the Space Marine, the Ultramarine Codex, the second edition one, the Marine on the front with the laurels around his head, the massive banner behind him, surrounded by a sea of blue and yellow and red, Space Marines, Terminators, a whirlwind in the back, all these big weapons, Devastators. I went through that in that store, front to back, and I fell in love with it. And that was it. I was hooked. I had to play this. Of course, I really didn't know what I was doing back then. So that Christmas, I asked my parents, I need to have these Warhammer miniatures. I love them. I have to have them. And the first things I ever got was a blister of Morgana Le Fay from the Bretonian Army. I don't have them all anymore. I gave that away long ago. 2 Beastmen, a blister of 2 metal Beastmen. Again, Morgana Le Fay and these Beastmen were metal with plastic shields for the Beastmen. And a box of Eldar Guardians, which I still have to this day. I've shown them off in some of the posts. I still have those guys. And that was where I started. I painted up those Guardians because I'm a big 40K junkie. I played a few games here and there, really small things, just trying to figure out the rules because second ed was a different beast. And then not too long after that, I got my first squad of Space Marines. The old 3-piece, 4-piece, include the base, push-fit one, just, stand there, squat with the bolters in front of them. And painted those guys up as Ultramarines very badly. I still have one of those. I actually posted a post on Games Workshop Facebook. They showed us your blue, show us your oldest model, new model, and I showed off that Space Marine plus Titus, which is probably the latest Ultramarine I've painted. And that was, I went from there. So over those intervening years, between then and I picked up some Terminators, the old small-scale Terminators on those smaller bases, and painted those up again horribly. I was not a great painter when I started. And I kind of went from there. Then 3rd edition dropped. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. That massive rule book with all the armies in the back is such a shift from 2nd to 3rd edition. That's when I started. I got my first Rhino, first Predator tank. I got a captain model, bikers, assault squad, some more tactical squads. I started filling out the army. I started hitting up, at this point, around that time, so it's late 90s, early 2000s. I moved with my dad. My parents had divorced many years beforehand, and it allowed me to have access to some local gaming stores. I was closer to the Games Workshop store, and I started playing some more games, just little things here and there, but I started getting and learning the game much better, and it was a lot of fun. I really liked third edition. I liked the codexes, the feel, the fluff of them, and all being very imperial. You're getting information, very twisted information, obviously, but that was sort of the whole. It was always felt like propaganda, which is kind of cool, and it drew you in to the universe. It was great. Third edition was great. I played a lot more games against a lot more opponents, especially near the ending of third. We had a little gaming group, which is a lot of fun. Learned what is good in a gaming group and what isn't because of that. At least there was one guy who was rather toxic, and he brought some drama to the group that probably shouldn't have been there, but I could do a whole video on why people do what they do in gaming groups and what it means, but that's something completely different. It was then we came to 4th Ed, which is my favorite edition of all time. That was, I think, the perfect starter set. I love the artwork that came out with that. The Space Marine Codex was divine. The Tyrannic War Veterans, of course, got to mention them, but the new, we got new models for Calgar and Tigurius, and Cassius came back. He was in 2nd edition, gone for 3rd, back and forth. Just the whole, the artwork itself, there was some very biblical, you could tell it was biblical painting style, just went into, there was a lot of that infused the artwork because these massive charges, intricate detailed art. The cover was my favorite. Calgar standing there blasting away with his honor guard around him, Tyranids everywhere. But the starter set itself amazed me. I mean, in terms of overall models, it was smaller than a lot of other ones, but the way it was set up, going from just having this crashed shuttle survivor, this pilot, which I still have, and the crashed shuttle, which is fantastic terrain, by the way. And going from that to having the 10 tactical Marines against the Gaunts and Gene Stealers, and the way they told the story and how they got you into it, how they showed you how everything worked, was brilliant. It came with a little booklet. It was great. But the better thing is, and this is back before Games Workshop store just became a web store. That's all it is now. There's lots of community stuff, which is great, but back then, this is 4th edition still, it wasn't about selling stuff. It was about adding to the, much like the community does now, adding in fluff, adding in cool, how to paint this, how to do that. You know, much like what the community stuff does now, what they do on YouTube, but just in one place beforehand. They added extra missions. So it's, okay, here's a mission where we introduce a Dreadnought. Here's a mission where we introduce Tyranid warriors. Here's a mission where we introduce a captain. Here's a mission where we introduce Biovore. So obviously expanding on what came from that box with things that made sense. And then a final mission was everything that they'd shown off, that they'd introduced in one big battle, which is really cool. And it tied in the story. Again, the 4th edition was all about the Battle for McCray, and it was a fantastic set. 4th was awesome because I was older. I could understand the rules a lot better, and it was just fantastic. I loved 4th. So much character, which started coming in 3rd. I remember 3rd edition, the codexes were very small back then, right? They were magazine sized. But as it went on, and we had things like the 13th Black Crusade, the campaign, which is fantastic too, as I was able to, I remember building, at that point I had my Ultramarines, I built a small Space Wolf 13th Company army, which is fantastic army. That campaign book came out with stuff for building an Ulthway army, a Lost and the Damned army, filled with mutants and Traitor Guard. The first sort of Cadian army, so you had Khazarkin, it was different than Imperial Guard, and you had the Space Wolves 13th Company. Of course, out of this came, you know, the Witch Hunters Codex, the Demon Hunters Codex, a new Guard Codex, which was fantastic, and a new Chaos Space Marine Codex is probably one of the best codexes they've ever made. It was filled with fluff, filled with great pictures, filled with a lot of cool rules. But the best thing is they had the books of chaos at the end of that codex, where you could build any one of the Traitor Legions with all this very cool specialized stuff. You could build a World Eater's army, Thousand Sons, Emperor's Children, you know, the Death Guard, whatever you wanted. Iron Warriors, all there, different ways of doing it. The Iron Warriors had access to Basilisk tanks from the Guard because they're siege masters, right? Great books, and obviously that carried into 4th. It was 5th edition back 2007 when I started working for Games Workshop. And 5th edition is my least favorite edition. A lot of the character that had been built up the 2 editions for suddenly disappeared. The codexes became very bland. A lot of the artwork was just black and white. It just was my least favorite edition. Although we did see some really cool stuff come out with that. We got the Vestroyans, the Cities of Death, a bunch of other really, really cool stuff came out in 5th. Planet Strike, cool rules in Chapter Proof for having massive tank battles. Lots of cool stuff in terms of that. But it's also when I started working for Games Workshop. And I learned a lot about what a priority was, what priorities Games Workshop had, what I thought I knew against what I actually didn't know, and what I need to learn. I had an amazing manager. At one point, we had an amazing crew, and it was fun. And that's why. Well, that's one of the reasons why I got the job. I went and managed it. I want to work here. I just moved in with my then girlfriend, who would eventually become fiance and wife, and I wanted to work at the store. I wanted to work at it so bad because I love the product. I love the games, even fantasy, which I wasn't big into. I needed to have it. I need to have this job. I got it. It was a learning experience because I thought I was doing a good job. Wasn't. I was able to shift around and do really, really well. And we had a wonderful, wonderful team. We were, I learned that, there's marks we have to hit in sales and demo games and selling, the basics, the starter sets, the rule books, paints, and all that stuff, the core items that you need. I learned all about that. It did change. It definitely changed my view on the company because before I had just been a fan, customer. Now I was on the other side. I wore the red shirt, and it changed how I interacted with people. It changed how I saw the company as a whole. Because now I'm not just worrying about what model I'm going to paint next and what's how to use this army. I got to worry about how to sell this to people, how to talk to people, make sure I'm doing it in the right way, make sure I'm upselling, make sure I'm hitting all the marks. We're hitting all our points, our sales, our core item sales. Make sure I know what's going on in the White Dwarf. Make sure I'm familiar with every single army that we had at that point, whether it's 40k fantasy, Lord of the Rings at that point, some of the specialist games. I need to know all that stuff in order to make sure I was an effective salesman. And we had a really good team at one point. We won Hobby Builder of the Year for North America, which is huge. Like we were just, but as things, people left, people changed. And there were some outside events that caused that change. One of them being the last Lord of the Rings movie coming out. So when that came out, interest in North America, at least, I can't speak, especially in Canada, from what I know, dropped. So our sales in Lord of the Rings dropped. And the money that was coming in hand over fist dried up. And Games Workshop had made some pretty bad decisions at that point in terms of locations, rents, and all that. And we had 2 stores in Ottawa at that point. I worked at one. There was another one out in the east end of Ottawa, and it closed. It was just in a really bad location. The sad part of that is what was called our Battle Bunker store. Now, I don't think they have that anymore. I don't think they've had it in a while, but what it was, for a very small annual fee, you had a basically private playing area. Not private in terms of it was just you, but you could go back there and play games without interference, which was nice because when you try to play games in a store, people, and this is my biggest pet peeve of all time, would pick up your models mid-game. Like, oh, that's really cool. Like, please, I'm playing a game. Oh, and they put it back in the wrong place. Or some kid would grab your tank, like, whee, and fling it around. And you're like, oh my God, this is going to end badly. But it closed. So at that point, my boss and I, because we were the only two, at this point, we were the only 2 regulars. Everybody else was part-time. And we got stuff from the old store for storage. We turned our back room into a gaming room, and we moved stuff around, built some big tables, very simple builds, just, wood, board, sand, paint. Did it up very quick, but we spent a lot of extra hours building these 2 rooms up. The front area we turned into a gaming area. It had been before, but this was like big time now. And we turned the back room, put 3 tables back there, lots of storage. It was a lot of fun. But that was one of the first big changes. It was still a lot of fun being there. I remember this is about the same time when fifth was still big, and they started changing things. We had at one point a black box that came in with new stuff, and we had a policy that if you hit your targets, you could paint stuff, your own stuff. And with these black boxes, if you painted up, you got to keep it. So I painted up things like the Dead Space Marines. For Apocalypse that came out around that time, I painted up the Masters of the Chapter. So those, I still have those models to the day, the captains from the Space Marines that gave you special rules in the Apocalypse game, which was huge. We had massive Apocalypse games. It was such a fun time at that point. But as you know, the saying, all good things must come to an end. My manager left. The people that took over that store should not have taken over that store. They were just not the people to manage it. And at the end, I actually became a part-timer at that point because I was going back to college to do something else, because even then I could see that this was not going to be a long-standing thing for me. The people there were not the best people to run that place. And the biggest change had happened, and this is one of the reasons why I went back. We lost the Canadian HQ. So Games Workshop had an HQ in Toronto, disappeared. All that stuff went to Memphis in the States. And that's when we kind of knew, okay, things are changing a lot right now, right? And eventually got to the point where the area manager, who got to keep his job, they still need area managers, came in, and myself and another part-timer were let go. And that sucked because nobody warned me, and they knew it was coming. And that sucked because I was outdoing everybody at that store. And that's not a hyperbole. I was outdoing everybody while I was a part-timer. And a lot of other stuff happened. I know at the store, we had one of the full-timers. He was the assistant manager. He had been saying, I'm quitting. He never quit. They finally told him, sit down, write in his paper when you're quitting, because I'm sick and tired of this. Two of the other store guys that didn't get fired or laid off, or wasn't fired, was laid off. I didn't do anything wrong. They were being investigated for time theft. And I should have seen that one coming. As I remember, it was one night, I was vacuuming the store, things were closed. I thought I heard the phone. I'm like, I'm just hearing things. I stopped vacuuming. The phone was ringing. I said, oh, hello, Steve speaking, Games Workshop. How can I help you? Games Workshop, whatever. And he's like, where were you? This is one of the airmen. So I'm like, I was just vacuuming the store. I was like, okay, cool, bye. I'm like, that's weird. Found out some of the other guys weren't doing the job. They would vacuum while the store was empty, or they do a really crappy job. They were out the door as soon as the store closed, which you're not supposed to do. You had an extra half hour to clean, count the cash, all that cool stuff. At that point, I took a break. I still had my armies. I was still getting white dwarfs, although at that point, the white dwarf wasn't the white dwarf anymore. It had been really cool beforehand with chapter approved and all this cool stuff. But I mean, that was always just really basic cover for being a catalog where you would see what was coming so you could buy it. At this point, the White Dwarf dropped all pretense. There were still battle reports. They weren't very good. It was just, this is the new stuff, buy it now, right? A lot changed in the corporate side of it, the culture. At that point, it was very secretive. We didn't know what was coming till at certain points, we knew after customers knew outside, because of, forums were a big thing at that point. Sneak peeks, leaks are still a thing, but we're very big at that point. And so we knew after other people, so it was very secretive. So I was still playing, I was still reading fluff, still painting. At this point, I had my Ultramarines army. I had a Black Templar army that I built because of a staff challenge while I was working Games Workshop in the better times. And I still have that army, and that was cool. At one point, I had an old school Rhino that I was going to paint up for this challenge. And my boss said, I will give you a box of Vindicators, 3 Vindicators, an Apocalypse box, if you do not use that. I said, cool, because he thought it was ugly and it was old. He didn't want it, and an army is being to be displayed. So with that box, I built 2 Vindicators and Rhino. I still use the Vindicators to this day. They've still been crushing the enemies of the Emperor. Built myself up a nice Black Templar army, which I still have. As I mentioned not too long ago, I just redid the squad, so it's still a legal Primaris, legal Crusader squad as it is now. But yes, there was a time in there about in between 2009 and 2015, I didn't play that much. I was still, reading all the articles, getting small things from Army here and there. I bumped into people at other jobs I had, and we found interest. I played games with them. So it was kind of just sort of existing in the hobby, watching stuff from the outside. 2015, I went back. Now, at this point, I was in college again to do computer stuff, and I was a key timer at the new location. It had moved from where it was before. It was a new location, and it was another surprise for me. It was kind of a wake-up call, because the corporate, it had changed again. The culture changed again. All the hobby building stuff gone. Even the White Dwarf, which has gotten better over the years, was still, in my opinion, trash. They did the whole thing where they split in half. So you had the White Dwarf and the White Dwarf Visions, where they put all the rules stuff in one small little magazine size, like very small size White Dwarf, and a much smaller pocket size Visions with all the artwork, and not even artwork, just all the models, the background stuff and all. It was horrible. And it was a big change. I remember I learned not too long ago that in 2015 when I joined up, the company almost closed. It was that bad. Sales were stagnant. I remember at that point we were into The Hobbit. So we had the Hobbit stuff, and that never sold at our store. And that's around the same time where they decided to do the end times for fantasy, because at that point, the Space Marine line of 40K, just that line alone, was outselling all of Warhammer Fantasy. So the end times is really cool. New models, new rules, massive battles, massive spells, blew up a whole planet, annihilated it, and went quiet for a while before, of course, Age of Sigmar came out. But yeah, it was huge. We got, there was a lot of changes in there. It was not a fun store to work at all. And one of the people running it was one of the people who's running the old store, someone who should not be running a store. They stopped asking me to come in as a key timer. I said, fine, this is not how I like the store to be. I know it's not my store, it's yours, but this is just not this is not the culture I want to be in. I want a place where people can come and have fun. And that store has been through a lot since then. It went through some really bad managers, really bad. Some fired for theft, some fired for just gross incompetence because the store looked like crap. It wasn't ready. There was garbage everywhere, just not being taken care of appropriately. It almost closed. The one store in Ottawa, Canada's capital, had one store and it almost closed. Luckily, it was saved by area manager, from what I understand, and said, hey, this is the nation's capital. We need to have a store. They have a really good manager now. Store's looking much better, running much better. And that, and in that time, there was a time there between where I barely played any games. I had maybe 1 or 2 games an edition. 6th and 7th I love the models. Rules got out of hand in 6th and 7th, and even in 8th, 9th, and 10. 10 right now is probably not my least favorite edition, but it's nowhere near my favorite edition. The rules load is insane. There's way too many rules. I think it's gone, right? But now we're here, 2015 to now. I didn't play much. I didn't build much. I repainted stuff, got small things here and there. I still have stuff to paint that I picked up several years ago. But part of that was also reaching out to the community and finding people to play games with, finding stuff in my local area. There's a bunch of stores near me now, like within walking distance that carry it. I played lots and lots of games, got back in the groove of things and having a ton of fun right now. It's also been interesting to see the IP version explode. I remember, back in the late 90s, there were very few games that were any good. There were card games, but mostly it was just, and it was a very small niche. Now, things like Dawn of War took off on the PC, that expanded it to new people. Space Marine was a fantastic game. Space Marine 2 was huge. All the Dawn of War stuff that's happened. Of course, finding out that you have people like Henry Cavill who play. I remember he broke Warhammer internet the day that he, on a simple post, he just put the head of a Custodes that he was painting, and now he's got an Amazon show. We've seen that episode of Secret Level with Titus in it, and that was amazing. That was a superb episode, just pure awesome. You know, and it just expanded and expanded and expanded. It's amazing to see it from 1995 to 2025, just how much it's exploded and expanded. It's been crazy to see. But yeah, I'll end that there. We're 2025 now, almost in the end of the year. 50 years of Warhammer. It's been a crazy ride for me in that 26 years I've been doing it, or 25, 26, whatever it is now. It's been a while. 95 to 99. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah. It's just been crazy to see it go from something small that no one knew about to people going, oh yes, Warhammer. I played the Space Marine game. I saw the thing on Prime now. Amazon's gonna have a show with Henry Cavill. Holy crap! And to see some of the other people that talking about big celebrities. I'll leave this one thing. The most beautiful moment I've seen in the community ever. And that was after the late great Robin Williams passed away, and it turned out he was a 40K fan. Now, I knew this for many years beforehand when the manager I had there, the one I liked, told us a story of when he was working in a store in Toronto and Robin Williams came in and he joked with them. And yeah, he was an avid fan, but his daughter Zelda put up a bunch of stuff going, what is this? My father loved this. Can someone help me figure out what all this stuff is? And he had one of the old Titans, like one of the old ones, the just amazing. And the outpouring of love and admiration, people going, oh, that's this, all these people want to help, and just remembering Robin Williams. The fact that and it's not something that ever came out when he was, around. It was obviously something that people didn't know about. They do now. Cavill gets asked all the time. But that was probably the most beautiful moments, because just a lot of people going, we miss your dad. This is what it is. Thank you so much. It was beautiful. So yeah, 50 years of Games Workshop. Hopefully we get 50 more. And thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for listening to this ramble. I just want to share my experience with it as we hit this pretty momentous milestone. So as I said, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, guys. Hit the like button, follow along if you don't, subscribe, and keep rolling those dice, and I will see you later. Bye.